You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program, a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew. Hello, friends, and welcome to a special episode of the Write Project podcast, where today we asked 12 of the greatest authors in Atlantic Canada what was the first book that got them interested in reading. We've got some great authors and people in the writing community to help answer this question. We have Paul Carberry, author of Zombies on the Rock. We have Laurie Doody. We have Bridget Canning, author of The Greatest Hits of Wanda Janes. We have Brad Dunn, whose book After Dark Vapors only just came out last month. We have Ellen Curtis, Diana Brown, Amanda Labonte, John Dobbin, Chelsea B., Helen Escott, and Kelly Power, all on this episode of the Write Project podcast, talking about the books that got them interested in reading. For me, personally, it's not one book, it's 3 books, all of which are comic books. For me, Matthew LeDrew, comic books were a big gateway into reading. I'm happy that my parents had the edict of whatever gets them interested in reading, put it in front of them. To that effect, my mother bought me a 3-piece blind bag with 3 comics in it. They used to sell these at the drugstore back in the day, and they were blind. You couldn't see the 3 comics that were inside, but they were packaged for $1. I guess they were comics that didn't sell or something like that, and she gave this to me as a present one day, and you couldn't have picked 3 more formative comics for my young self. These 3 comics, although I'm sure she thought they were age appropriate, and to an extent they should have been, the 90s were a weird time, they introduced me to horror for the first time. But they did it not through, they weren't Tales from the Crypt or anything like that. They introduced me to horror through the characters that I saw on Saturday morning TV every week. The first comic was Spider-Man number 7, otherwise known as the Agitatively Spider-Man number 7, because it didn't have an amazing or spectacular or anything like that in front of it. It was written and drawn by Todd McFarlane, and came out in February of 1991. It was an amazingly dark story which saw the hobgoblin who'd been turned into a literal demon by the devil in a previous issue. He's kidnapped a young boy and is trying to corrupt him in a way in a way that he's speaking in religious ways, and he's doing it in a way that's very reminiscent of some of the issues in the Catholic Church that were coming to light around that time. It's a very, very dark story featuring one of the most lighthearted superheroes ever, but Spider-Man's dealing with very dark themes and trying to cope with these sorts of issues during it. He teams up with Ghost Rider, who's a very demonically inspired hero, and the both of them, it forms a strange buddy cop dynamic where Ghost Rider wants to take Hobgoblin out to stop this evil in its track, and Spider-Man's trying to maintain some part of his humanity and stop Hobgoblin without actually killing him. It's an amazingly dark story, an amazingly good story. It ends with a kind of bittersweetness to it. There's something about it that's just very adultly handled. It was amazing to read in my youth. I still pick it up every now and again. It was the second part of the Masks arc, which was Spider-Man 6 and 7 from early 1991. Really amazing, mature stuff, which was a hallmark all throughout that arc of Spider-Man, much to the chagrin of any parent who picked it up and actually looked at it, but thankfully mine did not, because it influenced me in all the right ways. It taught me that just because these were good, stalwart, true characters didn't mean you couldn't put them in dark situations, and that the contrast between the good man in the dark situation was more interesting than if you had a good person within a good situation or a bad person in a bad situation. That contrast really spoke to me early on and influenced my early writings. The second comic was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures number 27, written by Ryan Brown. Again, Saturday morning cartoon characters. These were the Ninja Turtles with the brightly colored masks, and this was supposedly the kid-friendly of the two comic books that were produced at the time. There were some adult comics that were black and white, and there were these children's comics produced by Archie. But in this December 1991 issue, April O'Neil is kidnapped by horrific mutants of a scarecrow and an owl and a bunch of other deeply creepy creatures that are all based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and the prose is based on the work of H.P. Lovecraft, and there's a lot of very, very dark imagery and very, very dark things happening there. It of course ends okay. It is still, this was basically Archie's children's Turtles comic, but some of the themes and some of the imagery used were powerful and still stuck to me to this day. The story itself is called In the Dark. The last comic of the bunch, and possibly the darkest, was called Darkhold. It was Darkhold number 2, also subtitled Pages from the Book of Sins. This was another comic by Marvel, and it featured the Bible of Satan as a main plot point. There were 3 normal people in the Marvel Universe. One was a detective, one was the daughter of a priest, and one was a folklore professor trying to track down the pages of the Satanic Bible, which were being used to make evil wish fulfillment spells throughout the Marvel Universe. It was basically the X-Files, but set in the Marvel Universe. So in the issue in question, a bomber has gotten a hold to one of the pages and has used it to wish for a bomb that will destroy the city of Chicago. But because of the Marvel Universe, he's gotten a hold to a gamma bomb, which was used to create the Incredible Hulk. That has nothing to do with the story. It's a dark horror story that's set in the Marvel Universe and is very, very X-Files. It just uses the trappings of the Marvel Universe. It uses it as its backdrop and setting, and uses it to tell very, very dark stories, very mature stories. It may be the first LGBTQ character that Marvel had headlining a book in Victoria Montesi. Just amazing story. It was recently collected. It only lasted 16 issues, but it was recently collected in a trade paperback. I encourage anyone who's into the horror comics to check it out. It's an amazing issue number 2 especially, but the entire series was an amazing run, written by Christian Cooper with pencils by Richard Chase. But that's me, and you didn't all tune in just to hear about me. That was specifically my influences. But we've got some people who are calling in to give us what their influences were, and we're thankful for them. First, we have Kelly Power. Kelly is on the board at Wannell and has been helping our community for years through that position. She's become known for her short fiction in the last year or so. 2 of her short stories appeared in Chillers from the Rock last year, which went bestseller before even coming out. One of her short stories was in the collection What's Written in the Ladies, edited by Bridget Canning, to much acclaim. And her most recent short story will appear in Kitsora, the Autobiography, due out this December. Kelly, what was the book that got you interested in writing?
When I was in my primary school, we had a great little library, and I picked up this book one time called The Hotel Cat, and it was a novel-ish type of book. I mean, it wouldn't have been a terribly big novel. I couldn't have been more than probably 8 at the time, so it wasn't overly complex, but I remember devouring that book, and I can't tell you why.
You ate it?
Yes, I ate it. It tasted a little moldy.
Okay.
I loved that book, and I obviously loved it, because I remember to this day that I read that book, and I absolutely loved it, and it was just about a cat living in a hotel with other people and animals, and something happens toward the end of the book, and the cat rescues people, and I don't know, I found it, I mean, there are some fantastical elements in that. Maybe I was just always destined to be reading that kind of fiction, because I probably have a leaning toward it even today.
Oh.
Can I give you a different answer to that question?
Yes.
Or an alternative answer to that?
Okay.
Because it's not one I would have read. There's a book called Our Universe, and it was produced in the 70s by National Geographic. And I remember it had the spaceship on the cover, stars. So it's a book about different elements of the universe, and it had these vibrant colors on the glossy pages. I mean, as a kid, to turn those pages was absolutely amazing, but they had concept drawings of what life might look like on all of our different planets in the solar system, all these fantastical creatures and plant life that would be there. And when they did the planet descriptions, they had an illustration of the god that was associated with that particular planet. So, a drawing of Mars. And I remembered that book so well as a kid. I was talking to my brother about it I don't know, 6 months ago, and he remembered it, and he's 8 years younger than me. So that book would have been in tatters by the time he saw it. So it's a book with this massive depth of impression about not just itself as a book to engage you, but as it makes you think about and opens up your imagination to things. So I went online and I bought 2 used copies, and I have one for me now, and I gave one to my brother for his birthday, and I could not be more excited.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question. If the planets were discovered today, like if we were just now discovering the other members of our solar system, would they all be named after Harry Potter characters?
I would say I'm not sure, but I can definitely say that they would have the kind of gender and ethnic diversity that's reflected in the characters that J.K. Rowling created.
Yeah, I can tell you, I was looking up animals and insects that were discovered last year, and one is the Gryffindor spider, because it actually is a new breed of spider they've discovered, and the back of it, like that's usually very round, looks like a sorting hat. It looks just like it. So even the Latin term for it is Gryffindorius something. Like it's...
Love it.
So we can already see that no, absolutely, they are just naming stuff after Harry Potter now, just like back in the day it was Greek mythology.
Yeah, it's our modern myths, our modern mythological heroes.
Okay.
That's what I say. I mean, those characters are mythologized to a great degree, I think, in those books. So yeah, I stand by that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Next we have Helen Escott, author of the biggest book in Atlantic Canada right now, Operation Wormwood, which you should all check out. It makes a great gift for anyone who loves mysteries, thrillers, anything like that. Helen, what was the book that got you interested in reading first?
I think for me, it would be the Dick and Jane books.
All right.
I go back that far.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Next we have Chelsea B., author of London Calling. Chelsea, what was the book that got you interested in reading?
Nancy Drew and The Secret of the Old Clock, definitely, 100%.
So many people have answered Nancy Drew.
I love it because it's good, obviously.
Yeah.
But when I was in the 6th grade, we had you know how during the week before Christmas break or the last week of school, you just do fun stuff?
Yep.
We had that, and one of it was dress as your favorite literary character, and I was Nancy Drew from the cover of The Secret of the Old Clock, and I had the green dress, and that's when I was a natural blonde, and I had a little magnifying glass, and I thought that I was no one understood who I was. No one got it.
No.
Right? Everyone else was Judy B. Jones or something that everyone knew.
Shirley Holmes?
Judy B. Jones.
Shirley Holmes. Do you ever watch that show?
No.
Oh, there was a show on YTV, The Adventures of Shirley Holmes, and she was the spiritual descendant of Sherlock Holmes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's that Nancy Drew with me.
Funny story, Nancy Drew and The Secret of the Old Clock has some personal significance to me because it's the way I come up with character names is I look at stuff around me and just go, that name. There's no, I just pick it at random if it sounds right, as long as it sounds right. And the last name of my character, Xander Drew, from the Xander Drew series, came because I had that book on my bookshelf.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chelsea. Next we have John Dobbin, whose first book, The Starving, will hit store shelves in early 2019. What was the book that got you interested in reading, John?
My favorite book, I think, was Batman Nightfall. It was when the Batman had been broken by Bane when I was a kid, and they came out with a novelization about Azrael taking over for Batman.
I think I've read that.
Yeah, and I think it was called Nightfall, and I loved it. I read it multiple times.
I was a huge fan of that. That kind of got me in. I was a big comic book reader as a kid. That was my gateway into reading.
Yeah.
And then my gateway to transition from comics into novels. Not that I don't still love comics, but my gateway from that were the adaptations, where the Christopher Golden was my first real novel that I sought out.
Yep.
Thanks, John. Next we have Amanda Labonte, whose books Call of the Sea, Supernatural Causes, and Drawn to the Tides have earned her much acclaim. Amanda, what were the books that got you interested in reading first?
Oh. I mean, I did love Me, the Babysitter's Club, but...
They were cool.
They were fun. I think the book that got me into wanting to read and wanting to write was like kind of the same set of books. It was like I loved Anne of Green Gables, and I was a kid who had 3 false starts with Anne of Green Gables, but once I got it, I stuck with it. I love the story. I hate the dense, long paragraphs of description that exist in that writing of that time.
Yeah.
Like, in general, like, just the...
Product of its time.
Yeah, how the leaves looked on the trees when you're walking through the woods. I'm just... that's fine for 3 or 4 sentences, but a page-long paragraph, and I'm kind of over it. So that, like, it took me a while. Like, I knew kids who were reading, advanced readers who were into Anne of Green Gables at, like... 9-10 years old, and I was probably like 12, 13 by the time it actually like stuck. And when it stuck, I read like all the books in the series, but like it took me forever to get through the book, that first one.
I've read Anne of Green Gables for the first time last year when you recommended it, Jimmy.
Yeah.
For the there was some kind of book swap, summer book swap or something like that.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun. I gotta say, I really enjoyed that first book. So it's a series?
Anne of Green Gables. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 8 or 9.
I've
read them all. I'm just trying to think.
I remember looking it up, and I was surprised to find out that I was already familiar with the world because the Road to Avonlea show is based on the Anne of Green Gables universe.
It is. So there's the Anne of Green Gables books, and then there's 6 that are... Well, the first 5... Anne of Green Gables books are really about her journey, and then by book 6 we're kind of getting into her, like we're starting to go into what the kids are doing, and then by 7 and 8 you're in the kids' world.
Yeah.
Like her children's
Her
world.
kids?
Her
Oh,
kids.
okay.
And then there's the Chronicles of Avonlea book, which is, I think there might be 2 of those, and those are short stories where Anne appears here and there, like it's in her universe, but it's not her story. So yeah, when you think about it, she was like Lucy Maud Montgomery was quite the world builder, because Avonlea is not a real place.
No.
So her world and universe. So like the short stories have like secondary characters that kind of appear in like throughout like some of them appear in the Anne of Green Gables books, but then like she's done all these short stories to kind of give you more.
Well, I mean, that show
context.
Road to Avonlea was huge.
Yep.
I mean, that's a Canadian produced set in Canada show that. Even
and then there was another book about like the story girl, which is what a lot of the Road to Avonlea, the main characters are based on that, and then some of the secondary stuff that comes in are these short stories. So she had this huge universe.
That show had far reach, to the point where I didn't know, like I read the Avonlea books when I was in, I think, grade 6. I remember doing the book report, and there was a scene where like there was hay behind a false wall that was being hoarded, and he took out the thing and took out a little cork and got the hay from the evil store clerk who was keeping it, kind of thing. And I remember the picture that I drew, like illustrating that for the book report, stuff like that. Like that was a huge thing for me.
And then her Emily books, she wrote a trilogy.
Emily of New Moon?
Emily of New Moon. Those ones even kind of dabble in supernatural.
Okay.
And paranormal elements. Emily has this ability to like dream the future sometimes, or have dreams.
Prophesize.
And so, I mean, I just think that the Lucy Maud Montgomery books kind of just opened up a whole world.
Yeah,
of reading and writing for me. Like,
was that set in the same universe?
It wasn't.
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, same time period. Yeah. So, but Emily was... I read her a little older, and those books were even more interesting. And from the perspective of writing, she was that character. Because Anne kind of dabbled in writing, and then got married and had kids, and kind of it followed kind of her life, the journey that she kind of went on that way. But and through like university and teaching and that kind of stuff. But Emily kind of stuck with writing. She was, because a lot of Lucy Maud Montgomery's characters were writers or artists, or interesting in some way that way. So, but Emily stuck with the writing. So, to her journey is a little more interesting that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was a great book.
I recommend those. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's kind of one of those things where like it's a classic, and it's a Canadian classic, and don't. Like for younger readers, like don't worry about picking it up and having to put it down and try again, because I really feel like you should read, like when you're getting an introduction to reading, you should just read whatever keeps you reading. And like I read lots of Archie comics before I got through. Like,
comics were huge
books.
for me.
Yeah, So yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would, if you missed it as a kid, I read it, like I said, I read it last year. I'd even say pick it up now if you're interested. It's very readable.
Yeah.
It's almost, because it's meant for a younger reader.
Right.
Like, it's almost a breezy summer read now, because if you're an adult.
For sure,
because
yeah.
you can just flip on through the pages,
Yeah.
but it's still a great story.
Yep.
Thanks, Amanda. Next, we have Diana Brown, author of the book Saltwater Joys. Diana, what book got you first interested in reading?
The very first book from childhood was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's a cool book.
I was like in grade 1, and it was like Willy Wonka, and I always dreamed that I would find that little gold piece in the chocolate bar. So, and I loved how it, would, even as a young girl, it was like that one chocolate bar, could take them out of poverty and, take them to where he could only dream of being.
Interesting.
And even just he'd have the chocolate bar and just the little morsels.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't just eat all of the chocolate bar. So I kind of became that character for a little while, like wondering how it felt. So if I got a big chocolate bar, I try to eat little bits
Yeah.
But this is as a child, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think
Roald Dahl was an interesting fellow.
Yeah. So that was one of my very first memories.
Roald Dahl is an interesting author in that his absence is still felt.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what I do, I tutor some young children in literacy.
Yeah.
And one was reading his way through all of Roald Dahl's stuff.
Oh,
and he was 7.
Yeah.
And he read his way through the Roald Dahl library. Someone had gotten him. He's an avid reader. He's read everything that you can put in front of him. He just loves it.
Yeah.
Someone gave him the Roald Dahl library for Christmas.
Yeah.
And he had read his entire way through it. And then he asked me when I thought Roald Dahl was going to put out his next book.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I think Roald Dahl is dead.
Oh,
And-
my heart. Yeah.
And he's just like, it's still heartbreaking.
Yeah.
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 Thank you, Diana. Next on the line, we have Wannell secretary Ellen Curtis, also author of the Infinity series from Engine Books, as well as editor of the From the Rock series. Ellen, what book first got you interested in reading?
I did a lot of reading, even at a very, very young age.
I hear that you hated Lord of the Rings from a very young age.
No, I read Lord of the Rings when I was in grade 2. I really loved it. I've read it lots and lots of times, same with
Would
Harry
you
Potter.
say you have to be in grade 2 to enjoy Lord of the Rings?
No, I wouldn't. I would say it's something I've come back to many times over the years. But other books from childhood, I am really, really passionate about children's books. Maybe to a weird extent. I love children's books so much. I had one that was my favorite that was Blue Balloon. And it's just a story of a little boy with a blue balloon that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And he just ends on this like magical adventure floating off in this blue balloon. And I think that's
horrible. This is like a horror novel.
magical.
That
I
sounds like a horror
also
novel.
love Jan Brett. She's an amazing author, and all of her books, it's fantastic. Her books always have like this little Norse element to them, and it mixes mythology with nature and folklore, and I love that. I also really loved The Balloon Tree growing up. Don't all kids really like balloons? But no, this story is about a little princess, and her father has to leave the kingdom and leaves her with her uncle. And her uncle is not a nice guy, spoiler alert, and he, is trying to take over the kingdom, and she has this awesome tree that grows balloons and fills her kingdom with happiness, basically. That whimsical element to it has always really made me very happy.
What's up with the balloons? Why do balloons make people happy?
I mean, that seems like
contained air.
That seems like a question you should discuss with a therapist. Not with me.
Okay.
I'm content with just being happy, but if you want to delve into that and not pick that apart, that's a you problem.
It's an air prison.
Or is it a time capsule for a moment of happiness that you've preserved? I think it's a moment of happiness concealed in colorful joy.
Okay. We'll agree to disagree.
I mean, will we?
No.
Next, we have Brad Dunn, author of After Dark Vapors, which released just last month from Engine Books. Brad, what got you interested in reading at first?
I'm going to say The Hobbit. If there's any book that really turned me on to reading and getting into literature, it's definitely The Hobbit.
I really liked The Hobbit. I would definitely say I got into that in around grade 4, which is a little bit late for The Hobbit, I think. But I think it's at an age that a lot of people stumble upon it in their library in their school's library.
Yeah.
That one definitely got me into reading. What immediately got me out of reading was Lord of the Rings.
Man, I read The Hobbit in grade 9.
Yeah.
Which is like really old, I think. Definitely a lot older than the intended readership, but I mean, I think like you can read that novel at any age, and it's just it's excellent. There's so many. I look back and there's so many times where I like read. It's like this book came into my life at this like moment that's almost like I don't believe in like fate, but like it's not. That's what it feels like. Cause it's like, man, that was the book I needed at that time in my life, and I feel like that was like The Hobbit. Cause like when I read The Hobbit, I was 14. I just broken up with my first girlfriend. She started dating like my best friend at the time, so I was like heartbroken.
Yep.
And I had pneumonia, borderline double pneumonia. So I was like just as sick as you can get.
Yeah.
So I had nothing to do but just sit around in my house, and my mom gave me this book, and she's like, stop playing video games and like read a book. So I was like, okay. And I was like, I'm bored of this game, so I guess I'll try and read it. And it was like just like snap. Like I don't think I put it down for like 2 days.
Yeah.
Just read it like pretty much just like fell asleep. And then I read it in like 2 days, like, and then after that it was like it's like a drug. Like, you know, like you just like, and it just feels like my whole life I've just been chasing that high ever since.
Next we have Bridget Canning, whose book The Greatest Hits of Wanda James was recently shortlisted for the 2018 NLBA Awards. Bridget, what book first got you interested in reading?
My favorite childhood book is probably Harriet the Spy. It was funny, I remember, I think Lisa Moore was talking about it too. It's one of her favorite books. But I mean, she is kind of learning to be a writer, you know, in that book. And I remember I was probably in grade 3 or grade 4 when I read it, and it just kind of it felt so epic at the time. Yeah, but definitely it's the book I think the book I think about the most. I think when I think about my childhood books, it's the one. And also Dennis Lee, like Alligator Pie and Garbage to Life. Those poetry books, like I can still recite them in my head. I just remember them being so colorful, and they were illustrated so just so beautifully, and like really whimsical. So they would be up there as well.
Next on the line we have Lori Doody, whose book The Puffin Problem was also nominated for an NLBA this year. Lori, what book first got you interested in reading?
I feel like I have 2 different universes of children's books, because there's from my childhood, and now I'm back in the world of children's books reading to my kids now.
Either one then.
So I guess when I was a kid, I loved another Robert Munsch book. I loved Robert Munsch when I was a kid. I mean, still do, but I think it was called Purple, Yellow, and Green, and it was about a girl with masterful negotiating tactics of trying to get these like permanent never come out until you die markers from her parents, and promised that she wouldn't draw on the walls or on herself, and she winds up gaining their confidence along the way, and chaos is the end result. But it was I found that book so funny when I was a kid. But now there's a book, I think I must read it almost every day to my son. He loves it too. There's a book called Secret Pizza Party by Adam Rubin, and it is so funny. The combination of the illustrations and the text, it's just hilarious. It's about a raccoon that dreams of pizza all the time, but you know, obviously pizza shops don't want a raccoon in their pizzeria, so he has to devise a plan to get the pizza, and it's just a really, really funny book. So I really like that one now. I think that's my favorite.
Last but not least, we have Paul Carberry, who has 2 books out in his Zombies on the Rocks series currently, with a 3rd on the way in 2019. Paul, what books first got you interested in reading?
Goosebumps, Say Cheese and Die.
Yeah, I actually really like that one.
Yeah, and just the whole Goosebumps series, but that was my favorite.
That one and Monster Blood sticks out to me.
Monster Blood was good.
They were really influential.
They were.
Yeah, they were great.
I even see elements of that book, even though it's very elementary, those elements still work good in my novel. Like
horror's horror. I mean, it works out really well. They were good good books.
Because they do the same thing, like they end a scene, like a chapter, a little bit of a cliffhanger each time.
Yeah, to make you want to read more.
Right.
Okay, well, those were great eclectic answers from all, but we'd like to actually hear from you. Anyone out there, the Write Project Podcast, it does have a Facebook page. Feel free to go on and share what book first got you interested in reading. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.